Welcome to the Nonfiction Writers, podcasting in a great way. I'm Ryan Aber, joined live and in studio by Jason Kersey, fresh off some time off. Jason, how you doing?
Good. Little time off, but in that time off, I crammed in a trip to Muleshoe, Texas. So, it's been an interesting couple weeks.
Well, we're here to talk about special teams, and we'll get to that a little bit. But how was the trip to Muleshoe?
Awesome. It's a great town. I've working on a big profile of Lincoln Riley. That's his tiny little West Texas farming community, where there's one stoplight and a bunch of grain elevators, and a bunch of really, really nice people. I think I've interviewed probably 15 people for this story, and pretty excited about everyone getting a chance to see that.
Yeah, it should be a great read. That'll be in the Oklahoman sometime coming up in the next few weeks. But, Jason, we'll get to why we're really here, and that's to finish our countdown and look at position by position OU's football roster for 2015. And we've gone through the offense. We've gone through the defense. Now it's time for special teams. And at special teams, you've really got to start with kicker. There was surprisingly some problems last year. Michael Honeycutt struggled the last half of the season, and that cost them in a couple games. The Kansas State game for sure. The Bedlam game had some issues there that really hurt. But OU loses Michael Honeycutt. He's gone after a strong career, but they've got a pretty good kicker coming up. But we've heard that a few times before, and it hadn't panned out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Jimmy Stevens was somebody I think people were excited about coming out of high school, and that didn't work out real well. It definitely happens. But Austin Seibert, again, seems to be a pretty solid kicker. He's got a powerful leg. He had a nice high school career. There's a possibility he could punt and kick. I think he's capable of doing both, and they need both with Michael Honeycutt and Jed Barnett both leaving. So it'll be really interesting to see how they use him and in what ways they use him.
Yeah, and Austin Seibert's a guy who got a lot of attention, certainly around here and even nationally last year. What was it, a 73-yard field goal he kicked in warm-ups before one of his games?
Something like that, yeah.
So he's definitely got the leg, but obviously you wonder how he does it in a college situation and under the pressure that comes with a game day atmosphere. But there's no doubt he's got a leg that's to this level and beyond. Yeah,
he definitely does, and for a couple of years they had a pretty reliable guy in Honeycutt, but something happened to him in the last half of last season. I don't know that anybody can quite put their finger on what exactly that was. What exactly happened to him? Seemed like one bad kick against Kansas State sort of snowballed into a bunch of bad kicks, throughout a bunch of costly bad kicks throughout the rest of the year. I don't think that they would have won Bedlam anyway. I think that game was lost when Tyreek Hill returned the kick for a touchdown, but the punt for a touchdown. But still, there was still a chance for them to win if he makes that in overtime. And when he missed that field goal, I think everyone knew for sure what was about to happen.
Yeah, and they definitely need some stability there, not only for this season coming up, but moving forward. And the hope is that Austin Seibert can be that guy and stabilize things at the kicker spot.
Yep.
And also, he's one of our favorite guys because, one, he's been a guest on this podcast before, but two, he is certainly not shy about saying things on social media and getting things stirred up. He said some things, I think, when the Boz documentary came out, wanted to try to get that number in the All-American game if he could, I believe, and then has taken some shots at Texas on Twitter as well.
Yeah, we'll see how long that lasts, though. OU has a tendency of getting a hold of these guys and sucking all the personality out of them, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, especially in our business, but also just period, not getting to see their true personalities come out. But it's not only Austin Seibert at the kicker spot. Nick Hodgson is a guy who was fantastic last year and the last couple of years at kickoffs. Consistently put the ball into the end zone and through the end zone, and he's going to be back, probably going to have that role again next year. But if Austin Seibert struggles a little bit, you could see him stepping into the place kicker's role as well.
Yeah, he could win the job outright, I think, from the beginning of the year. I think he's talented enough. It'll be interesting to see. I think they signed Austin Seibert for a reason, though, and I think that reason is field goal kicking. But Nick Hodgson is definitely there and is going to have a chance.
Now let's move to punter. You alluded to it a little bit that Austin Seibert has the ability to do both. He stated his desire to do both if everything happens. Jed Barnett was quietly a very productive player for the Sooners the last couple of years, especially last year. He moves on now, and only 2 punters on the roster, 2 Jacks, walk on, Jack Brott and Jack Steed. Who do you think has the advantage for that spot?
I don't know anything about either of those guys. I'm totally honest and upfront. I know very little about either one of them, so I don't know. I know that Austin Seibert has a scholarship, and I think that probably may play a role. So maybe he will get a shot at doing both. But OU definitely has had good punting now for several years between Tress Way and then Jed Barnett. So it'd be interesting to see who they put back there to try and keep that going, because that's obviously a huge part of the game that sometimes is easy to overlook.
Yeah, now let's move to the other side of that. We've talked about kicking and punting. Now let's talk about kicking and punt returning. We'll start off with the known, and that's kick returner. Last year, Alex Ross was so good in that role, especially early in the season. I know teams adjusted a little bit, but was still effective, but had the 2 big returns for touchdowns. His speed makes him perfect for that role, and certainly this year with the questions over how much he gets used offensively with Samaje Perine and certainly Joe Mixon being added to the backfield as well, there's no doubt that Alex Ross has a role in special teams for this team.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously he's going to be the guy in kick returns, and unless he gets hurt, there's no reason to change that. So that's the easy thing. We know that's of these 4 spots. That's the one that we know for sure what's going to happen. Towards the end of last year, teams started to maybe strategize a little bit more about him once people were more aware of him, but he's fast enough to really make something happen anytime he has a ball in his hands. And I imagine he'll be, I don't expect to see him used a ton on offense, honestly. I mean, I think he'll play, but he's more of a change of pace guy. When he was in the game, when they really needed him to run between the tackles against Oklahoma State last year, he wasn't capable of doing it. That's just not his thing. I think he's that's going to be much more for Perine and Mixon and maybe Rodney Anderson. But in terms of kick return, that's where his niche is, and I think that that's where he can still make his greatest impact.
Now at punt return, there's much more uncertainty there. Last year it was Sterling Shepard when he was healthy. Then Zach Sanchez took over after Sterling Shepard's injury. But a lot of fair catches out of both, and fair catches that at times you wondered if they couldn't turn it into at least some extra yards. And OU has been so good at punt returning over the last several seasons. It was a big step backwards last year, and it seems likely there's going to be some kind of change there.
There would have to be. I mean, Sterling Shepard is, for as good as he is at wide receiver and as good of a return man as he was in high school, he's just not a punt returner, I don't think, at this level. And maybe that'll change, but I just don't see him being back there again. I think it'll be, new junior college receiver D.D. Westbrook or maybe Micaiah Quick. I think those would be the 2 guys that would be most likely to take over that spot. But they're going to have to do something because they were so good back there. Jalen Saunders was such a game changer. Justin Brown was before that. With that threat back there, but they just didn't have that threat. Nobody was fooled last year. They weren't making anything happen.
Yeah, and it seems like D.D. Westbrook would be the guy with the greatest upside, junior college wide receiver, expected to contribute big things on the offensive side, but he very openly talked about his desire to return punts for this team in the spring when we got to talk to him, and it seems like with his speed and his punt return ability that he's shown in the past. Now, like we talked about with the kickers and like you mentioned with Sterling Shepard, that doesn't always translate once you get to major D1 level, but he's shown that he can do it before.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
So we've run down the gamut, Jason. Punt return, kick returner, kicker, and punter. If you had to pick one, who's going to be the biggest difference maker on the special teams this year for the Sooners?
Well, I mean, I'm going to have to take the easy one and say Alex Ross. I mean, he's the one that we know about. Until somebody else proves something somewhere else, it's sort of hard to say anybody else, I think. Alex Ross is the one we know can be a difference maker and probably will be.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, but in the interest of giving a different answer, I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb and say that D.D. Westbrook, I think, is going to be a strong punt return option for this team. I think he's going to make some big-time plays for them. He's not going to be perfect all the time. I think there's there's going to be times when he's going to either struggle to hold on to the ball or make poor decisions with it. But I think his speed and his ability to find open space, I think, is going to be big for this punt return team. I think they're going to go back and maybe not be as good as they were when Jalen Saunders and Justin Brown were returning punts, but I think they're going to be much better at punt returning this season. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for listening to our series breaking down position by position OU's 2015 roster. We'll be back soon with another edition of the podcast. Until then, you can check us out every day at newsok.com and every morning in the Oklahoman for the best OU coverage anywhere.